He never hit me, but somehow I still bled. It took me years to understand that not all wounds are visible. Some cut deeper, right through your sense of self, slicing into your confidence, your memory, your voice. I didn't have bruises to point to, no dramatic story of escape. Just this heavy, constant ache that I couldn't name for the longest time people used to compliment our relationship. He adores you, they'd say, watching the way he smiled when he held my hand in public, and maybe he did, in a way. Someone adores a mirror, something that reflects exactly what they want to see. I became that mirror, behind closed doors. I was quiet, careful. I watched his moods like a storm system, always adjusting, always anticipating. I filtered every sentence. I said sorry when I didn't know what I'd done. And I convinced myself that was love, giving more, needing less, shrinking down. There were no fights. Just long silences that somehow made me feel responsible. There were no insults, just questions that made me doubt everything I thought I knew. I began to believe the story he told me about myself, that I was difficult, dramatic, ungrateful, that he was the patient one, the savior, and because he never raised his voice, because he never touched me in anger, I thought maybe I was just sensitive, maybe the pain was my fault, maybe I wasn't built for love. That was the part that broke me the most, not the way he twisted the truth, but the way I helped him do it, because I didn't just believe his lies, I lived them. I still remember the first time he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. It wasn't just the way his eyes held mine, it was the way he saw me. Like he already knew the parts I tried to hide. My insecurities didn't scare him. If anything, they seemed to draw him closer. He remembered little things, things no one else ever paid attention to, the way I pulled at my sleeves when I was nervous, how I avoided eye contact when I didn't feel safe. He noticed, and he didn't just accept it, he made me feel like it was beautiful. Like I was beautiful because of those things, not despite them. It felt like someone had finally chosen me. Not for how well I performed, or how much I gave, but just for being me. He said things like, "You're not like other people," and I let those words wrap around my heart like a blanket I didn't know I needed. For the first time in a long time, I felt special. I felt safe. Our relationship moved fast, maybe too fast, but I didn't question it. When something feels that good, you don't stop to ask why. He texted all the time, wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. At first, it felt like attention. Like he cared. Some of my friends raised eyebrows. One of them even said, "He seems intense." I laughed it off. "You're just jealous I found someone so thoughtful." That's what I told myself. That's what he told me to. Then the little things started, guilt wrapped in sweetness. If I didn't reply fast enough, he'd say, "I guess you're too busy for me now." If I wanted a night to myself, he'd say, "I just didn't expect you to need space so soon." He never yelled, never accused, just quiet statements. That made me question my own heart. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was pulling strings while making me feel like I was leading the dance. And I wanted to keep dancing. I wanted to keep being the girl he saw, fragile, misunderstood, chosen. So I ignored the hesitation in my chest. I told myself this is what love is supposed to feel like, intense, consuming, unshakable. What I didn't know was that the moment I believed I had found something perfect was the moment I started losing myself. It didn't fall apart all at once. That's the thing no one tells you. You don't wake up and realize you're broken. It happens slowly, so slowly, in fact, that you think you're still whole. He started pulling away in the smallest ways. A colder goodnight, a longer pause before replying. Less softness in his voice. But when I asked if something was wrong, he'd sigh and say, "I just have a lot on my mind," and then I'd feel guilty for making it about me. He didn't say I was wrong. He just asked questions that made me think I was. "Are you always this sensitive? Why do you twist everything I say? Isn't this what you wanted?" I started doubting myself, not just my words, but my intentions, my memory, my sanity. He didn't like my friends. He said they put ideas in my head. "They don't understand us," he'd whisper, brushing hair behind my ear. "They just want to see you alone again." It wasn't said with anger, it was said with care. So I started pulling away from them. I stopped sharing things. I didn't want to risk losing what we had. When I cried, he'd say, "Here we go again." When I got quiet, he'd say, "You're shutting me out." No matter what I did, it felt like I was failing him. And the worst part, I kept trying harder. I apologized for everything. For asking too many questions. For not asking enough. For being tired. For laughing too loud. I apologized for existing in ways he didn't approve of, and then thanked him for staying. And when he withdrew affection, I didn't blame him, I blamed myself. I thought if I could just be a little more patient, a little more understanding, a little less me, maybe he'd come back to who he was in the beginning, but that version of him was already gone. Or maybe he never existed in the first place. The truth is, I didn't see myself disappearing. I only saw the pieces of me that no longer felt good enough. And I assumed I was the problem, because when someone rewrites your reality gently enough, you don't fight it. You call it love and hold it closer. It happened on a Sunday. We were out with friends, his friends. Mostly, I remember laughing too loud at something someone said, just for a moment forgetting to monitor myself. And then I felt his eyes on me. Not soft, not amused, just sharp. Later, in the car, he said it so quietly I almost missed it. You love being the center of attention, don't you? I froze. What? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just saying, maybe next time you could try being a little less desperate. I stared out the window, swallowing something thick and hot. Embarrassment, shame, I couldn't tell anymore. I just knew it sat in my throat, heavy and unspoken. By the time we got home, I was the one apologizing. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to show off. He nodded like he was doing me a favor by accepting it, and I thanked him for forgiving me. For staying, that night, I curled into myself on the far side of the bed, wondering how I became someone who apologized for laughing, for existing, for being seen, but I didn't leave. Instead, I turned inward. I told myself it was a bad day, that he was stressed. That maybe if I were more patient, more understanding, more loving, he'd stop hurting me, that I could somehow fix this by being better. The truth is, I didn't want to believe the person who made me feel so special could also be the one destroying me. It felt easier to believe it was my fault, because if it was me, then maybe I could change it. I didn't see it as abuse. I saw it as a test I was failing, and every time he hurt me, I rewrote the story so it made sense. I was too much, I was not enough. I was the problem, and in that silence, I began to vanish. It started with a conversation I almost didn't have. A friend I hadn't spoken to in months messaged me out of nowhere. We met for coffee, and she told me a story about her ex, the way he used to twist her words, isolate her from people, make her feel like everything was her fault. She said it casually, like she'd already grieved it, but for me, it wasn't casual. Every sentence landed like a punch to the gut. I smiled and nodded and said, that sounds awful, but inside, I was unraveling. That night. I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and typed in words I never thought applied to me. Why do I always feel like the bad one in my relationship? Why do I feel guilty even when I haven't done anything wrong? And there it was, article after article, thread after thread, gaslighting, coercive control, emotional manipulation. Words I had never used before suddenly explained everything I couldn't say out loud. I saw myself in every example. The apologies for things I didn't do, the fear of being misunderstood. The quiet erasure of who I used to be. It didn't make me angry at first, it made me tired. Tired in a way I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. Then came the moment. A simple one, really. He told me he hadn't read my message. But I'd seen the read receipt hours earlier. I looked at him and said, "You sure?" And he looked me in the eye and lied again. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't try to prove anything. I just sat there, completely still. And in that stillness, something broke free. I realized I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't sensitive. I was being lied to, plainly, deliberately, casually. That was the moment I woke up. I didn't leave that night. I wish I could say I did, but something inside me shifted, and it never shifted back. It was the first time I saw the truth and didn't flinch. The first time I stopped defending him inside my head, and from that moment on, I knew this wasn't love. It never was. Leaving wasn't a clean break. It never is when love and pain live in the same room. The first time I said, I can't do this anymore, his face crumpled. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He cried. Big, broken sobs that made me feel like the villain. Like I had just destroyed the only person who ever loved me. He told me he'd go to therapy. That he'd been reading about gaslighting, that he didn't know what he was doing until now. That he finally saw it, and me clearly. He said he couldn't live without me, that he'd change. That we'd start fresh, just give him one more chance, and I almost did, because, for a moment, the tenderness came back, the one who kissed my forehead, who knew my favorite coffee order, who used to call me his person. He reappeared like a ghost just long enough to haunt me, but something was different this time. I had started keeping a journal, nothing elaborate, just a cheap notebook with shaky handwriting and half-finished sentences. I wrote down every lie, every promise that felt like deja vu. Every time I left a conversation feeling smaller than I'd entered it. It became my mirror. The place where his words couldn't be rewritten the next day, where I never said, "That didn't work." It was my proof that I wasn't imagining things. That the hurt had history, that the pattern wasn't a coincidence. I still doubted myself. Still wondered if I was giving up too soon. But now, when those doubts whispered in my ear, I opened the journal and read my own truth. Not the version he handed me, but the one I lived, and one morning, without warning, I just knew I didn't know him another chance. I owed myself freedom. So I left. No long speech, no final cry. Just a quiet goodbye and a door that didn't open again. Leaving was just the beginning. I thought the hard part was over once I walked out. But no one tells you how quiet the world feels when you're no longer constantly afraid. At first, I didn't recognize myself. I second-guessed everything I said. I flinched when someone raised their voice, even in laughter, compliments made me suspicious. Kindness felt like a setup. My instincts had been rewired to equate affection with danger. Therapy became a lifeline. I remember sitting in that room, arms crossed, heart guarded, waiting for someone to tell me I was the problem. But my therapist didn't do that. She asked questions that made me think in new ways. She helped me understand how deeply I had been trained to mistrust my own voice. That it wasn't weakness that kept me in that relationship, it was survival. I started journaling again, not just to track the hurt, but to rediscover who I was beneath it. I wrote down the things that made me smile, the things I wanted. The things I missed about myself. Little by little, I reclaimed pieces of me. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I cried through some of those conversations, not because of what they said, but because they welcomed me back without blame. I didn't have to explain everything. They just hugged me and said, "We're glad you're here." I went back to work. At first, just a few hours, then more. I found comfort in small routines, making my own coffee, choosing what music played in my apartment, buying flowers just because I wanted to. Those little choices felt revolutionary. I didn't heal all at once. There were days I felt strong, and days I felt like I was pretending, but the difference was, this time, I didn't shrink. I took up space, not the kind you fight for, the kind you deserve. It had been years. I had changed cities, changed jobs, changed the rhythm of my life. The pain didn't sting the way it once did. It lived further back in my memory, like a fog that no longer touched my skin. Then one day, a message. Just for words, "I miss you, please." I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. There was no panic, no flashback, just a quiet sadness, not for what we were, but for the girl who once would have answered. I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote something for myself. A kind of letter I'd never send. "I don't forgive you. And I don't need to." This isn't about closure from you, it's about freedom from needing it. I used to think closure had to come from conversation, that it needed to be mutual, but healing taught me that some chapters end without permission. That silence can be an answer. That strength isn't always loud. I still carry scars, but they no longer own me. I use my voice now, not to scream, but to share. I talk to women who doubt their gut the way I did. I tell them the truth. Abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes dressed as love. I don't tell them to hate. I tell them to recognize, to remember that their voice matters. That they're not too sensitive, or too broken, or too hard to love. He doesn't know who I am anymore. But I do doubt the lies never defined me, but believing them almost did.